My name is Fidencio Salazar. I am 52 years old, and I have been an evangelical pastor for more than 20 years here in El Paso, Texas. I lead the Aguas de Vida Pentecostal Church in the Sunset Heights neighborhood, one of the fastest growing congregations in the city in recent years. Our church has 2,800 faithful members, 47 employees, and a temple that cost $8 million. It was inaugurated in 2016. My wife, Zelda, leads the women's ministry with great dedication, and my 19-year-old son, Fabricio, leads the youth with an energy that spreads throughout the entire congregation. It wasn't always this way, brothers and sisters. In 2014, I went through the most difficult trial of my life when I was falsely accused of child abuse by a resentful former member who had been disciplined by the church. The entire city turned against me. The local newspapers waged a terrible smear campaign that nearly destroyed our ministry. Many brothers abandoned me in those dark days, but God was preparing something much greater. The truth always prevails, and when everything became clear, our church emerged stronger from that tribulation. The great moment in our ministry occurred in 2017 when the daughter of the mayor of El Paso was given up by doctors for terminal leukemia. The family was traditional Catholic and attended Sacred Heart Cathedral, but in desperation, they came to our church asking for prayer. During a victory service, I laid my hands on the girl and cried out to the Lord with all my faith. 3 weeks later, medical tests showed no signs of the disease. The miracle spread throughout the city, and to this day, Catholics seek us out for prayer. After that episode, our church exploded in growth like we had never seen before. Entire families were converted, businessmen began attending our services, and offerings increased significantly. Month after month, I was able to buy a new white BMW in 2016, and we moved to a gated community in the most exclusive area of the city. My family was prosperous and blessed, and I felt like a true anointed of the Lord. The neighbors respected me, and even the pastor of the local church greeted me warmly on the streets. Our church ran like clockwork. Crescencio, my treasurer for 10 years, managed the finances with admirable efficiency that everyone envied. Euphemia led Sunday school with great dedication, teaching the children about Jesus with great love and patience. Placido, one of the oldest deacons, was always available to help with the needs of the congregation, no matter the time. Doña Consuelo, who always sat in the front row, was an example of faithfulness to all the members of the church. The ministry was growing so much that we began planning the construction of a second church in the Lowell Valley neighborhood to meet the demand of the new converts arriving each week. The architects had already presented the complete project, and we were raising funds to begin construction. Some older deacons were resisting the project, considering it too ambitious for our means, but I was certain that it was God's will. After all, He was blessing our work in extraordinary ways. Zelda was an exemplary wife, always at my side during services, organizing church events with a perfection that all the sisters admired. She had a natural charisma with the women of the congregation, and the women's ministry thrived under her wise and loving leadership. Fabricio was preparing to be my successor in the future, showing great talent in preaching and leading young people in a way that filled me with pride. Our family was seen as a model for the entire congregation. The services were always packed to the rafters, especially on Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights. The night he preached about prosperity, financial victory, and divine healing, and the testimonies blossomed every week like flowers in spring. Businessmen gave testimonies of million-dollar contracts after prayers. Families were completely restored. Young people were freed from drugs forever. The anointing was strong upon our ministry, and I felt that God was using our church to transform the entire city of Paso Todora. My assistant pastor of the past 5 years was my right-hand man in absolutely everything related to the ministry. He helped me with the sermons when I couldn't, he visited the sick when my schedule was full, and he had a very powerful prophetic word that edified the entire congregation. He was married to Kamla, they had 2 young children, and they lived near the church in a house that the congregation had helped them buy. Deodoro had a degree in theology and was very knowledgeable in the scriptures. and I fully trusted his pastoral work. Our church had significant political influence in the city of El Paso. Several council members were members or supporters of our congregation, and I had direct access to the mayor's office when necessary for important matters. This helped us tremendously with bureaucratic matters for church events and obtaining permits for construction and renovations. God was opening important doors to further expand the kingdom of heaven. I felt like a true ambassador of Christ in Texas. The routine was intense, but very rewarding for my soul. I got up early to study the Bible and prepare sermons. I visited members during the day. I participated in administrative meetings in the afternoons, and in the evenings I held regular worship services. I reserved Saturdays entirely for family, and on Sundays we had 3 services, morning, afternoon, and evening. It was physically tiring, but seeing them transformed by the power of God made up for all the effort. Our church was truly a beacon of hope throughout the city. Everything seemed absolutely perfect in our ministry until that early morning of August 15, 2018, a date that would change my life forever, when God decided to show me a truth I never imagined I would discover about my own congregation. I had been fasting for 7 days straight, seeking God's guidance about the construction of the second church in the Lower Valley neighborhood. The resistance or some senior deacons to the project was deeply bothering me, and I needed a clear word from the Lord to make the right decision. I had finished the victory service around 10:30 p.m., but I felt in my spirit that I should remain in the church praying until very late. I dismissed all the workers and remained alone in the sanctuary, kneeling before the main altar. The church was completely silent, with only the altar lights lit, creating an atmosphere of reverence. I cried out to the Lord for wisdom to deal with the situation of the deacons who were questioning our vision of kingdom expansion. Lord, show me if this project is truly according to your will. I prayed fervently with all my heart. Suddenly, I felt a strange chill take over the air. Even though it was August and the temperature was mild outside, I thought it was the air conditioning, but the chill was different, supernatural. The church lights began to flicker strangely, once, twice, 3 times in a row, and then stopped completely. This had never happened before. Our electrical system was new and top quality, installed by the best electricians in the area. I raised my eyes to check for any technical problems, but at that moment, I felt a powerful presence filling the entire sanctuary. The silence became even deeper, as if time itself had stopped. It was then that I heard a voice as clear as crystal, yet as gentle as a desert breeze. It wasn't coming from any specific place, it seemed to echo from all directions at once. Fidencio, come see the truth about those who chant my name, the voice said with an authority that made my whole body tremble violently. My heart raced, and I knew immediately I was in the presence of God Himself. It wasn't a hallucination, it wasn't fatigue from prolonged fasting, it was completely real. I tried to respond, but my voice wouldn't come out at all. My throat was completely dry and a tremor gripped my entire body from head to toe. I had never experienced anything like this in 20 years of pastoral ministry. I had prayed for many miracles, I had felt the strong anointing during powerful sermons, but this was different. It was the manifest presence of the Almighty. The air around me seemed dense, charged with divine power. The next day, we reviewed the church's security cameras to understand what had happened during the night. To our great surprise, the recordings showed a strange, bright light moving across the altar at exactly the time I was praying alone. Crescencio, who operated the security system, was left with no explanation. Pastor, I've never seen anything like this on the recordings, he told me, completely intrigued. The light wasn't of natural origin, it wasn't a reflection from a car or anything like that. I told Zelda about the supernatural experience when I got home, but she thought I was very tired from the prolonged fast. Love, you need to eat, you've been drinking only water for a whole week, she told me, very concerned about my physical condition, but I knew it wasn't a hallucination or physical weakness of any kind. My spirit was alert, my mind was clear, and that voice still echoed in my ears as if I had just heard it. Fabricio also questioned the experience when I mentioned it to him during family breakfast. Dad, Maybe God is talking about expanding the ministry further, about reaching more people. He suggested with the enthusiasm typical of his youth. Deodora, who was always present at our family gatherings on Saturdays, agreed with my son. "Pastor, I believe the Lord is preparing something big for our church," he said with great conviction, but I felt there was something much deeper in that divine message. Throughout that week, the phrase continued to hammer in my mind without ceasing, "Come see the truth about those who sing my name." What God wanted to show me about our congregation. Our members were faithful, tithed regularly, and actively participated in services. We had testimonies of transformation every week. People were being healed, families completely restored. What hidden truth existed about our brothers and sisters that I wasn't seeing? I prayed intensely during those days, asking for more revelation about the meaning of that heavenly message. I fasted for 3 more days, in addition to the initial 7, seeking a second word from the Lord. I read the Bible more intensely, especially the prophetic books, seeking to understand what God wanted to reveal to me. Something told me that this supernatural experience was just the beginning of something much bigger to come. The congregation noticed my change in behavior during that entire week. I was more introspective during sermons, more observant during regular services. I began to notice details that had previously gone unnoticed, facial expressions during worship, strange behavior from some members, conversations that would break off when I approached. It was as if God were sharpening my spiritual perception for something I was about to discover. 15 days after that first supernatural experience, while praying alone again in the church, I felt that something extraordinary was about to happen, a revelation that would completely change my understanding of my own church and the people I thought I knew. In a split second, I felt my body lift off the ground as if I were floating in the air without any physical support. It wasn't a normal bodily sensation. It was as if my spirit had been transported to another dimension completely different from anything I had ever known. My feet were no longer touching the cold floor of the church, and everything around me had transformed into a bright golden light that didn't hurt my eyes. The atmosphere was silent, but at the same time filled with a supernatural peace I had never experienced in my life. In front of me, a gigantic book the size of a large table materialized, with pages that shone like liquid gold melted in the sun. The edges were ornate with details that looked like inlaid precious stones, and a soft light emanated from each open page as if it had a life of its own. I tried to reach out to touch it, but my fingers simply passed through the pages as if they were made of pure light. It was the most beautiful and majestic object my eyes had ever beheld. I immediately knew what the Book of Life was, that sacred record the Bible mentions, where the names of all those truly saved in Christ Jesus are written. I could feel divine power emanating from every line, from every letter written in perfect, golden calligraphy. The words seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and I knew I was looking at something very few human beings had ever had the privilege of seeing in all of history. I began flipping through the pages, desperately searching for the names of my congregation members as I passed by. My heart pounded with anticipation. After all, we had 2,800 people in our church. Many of them were converted through our pastoral ministry. I started with the oldest members, those I was absolutely certain were saved. I first looked for Doña Consuelo, who had always sat in the front row for 15 years. Her name wasn't there. I flipped through several pages, looked in different sections of the sacred book, but Doña Consuelo's name simply didn't exist in the Book of Life. My stomach turned completely cold. How was this possible? She was one of the most dedicated sisters in the entire congregation. She never missed services, always contributing generous offerings to the work. I began searching for other familiar names, growing increasingly desperate with what I was discovering. As I flipped through the golden pages, I saw something even more disturbing and terrifying. Some names were being erased in real time by an invisible hand moving over the sacred pages. The gold ink simply disappeared as if it had never existed, leaving only the empty parchment. It was terrifying to realize that people were losing their salvation at that very moment for reasons I still didn't fully understand. I searched for the name of Crescencio, My trusted treasurer of 10 years, nothing at all. Euphemia from Sunday school, he wasn't present either. Placido, the deacon who always helped me with everything. His name had been completely erased from the record. A chill gripped my spiritual being as I realized I was discovering a devastating truth about my own church. As a pastor, I should know the true spiritual state of my flock. With each page I turned, the anguish in my chest increased tremendously. Where were the names of the people I thought were pillars of our congregation? Where the worship leaders, the deacons, the sisters of the prayer circle were? Because the book was practically empty when it came to the members of the Aguas de Vida Pentecostal Church. I was beginning to understand that something was terribly wrong. I continued searching with more urgency, turning the golden pages faster and faster. I found a few names that I immediately recognized. Primitivo, the humble gardener who worked in church maintenance without ever complaining. Esperanza, the young woman with Down syndrome, whom everyone half ignored, but who prayed for everyone. Lona Refugio, the cleaning lady who always arrived early to clean the church. The marginalized and despised were saved. Suddenly, one specific page powerfully caught my attention. Names were constantly being written and erased, as if were constantly changing based on the decisions they made. I recognized some of them. They were people in our congregation who were in the process of spiritual decision at that very moment. Their souls hung between salvation and perdition, depending on the choices they were making in their daily lives. I flipped through a few more pages and found a section that completely chilled my blood. There was a list of exactly 43 names, and I recognized that they were all members of our church in El Paso. Of 2,800 people, only 43 were truly saved. The rest, more than 2,700 members, their names simply did not exist in the divine record. Finally, with my hands shaking with pure terror, I decided to search for my own name in the sacred pages of the book. After all, I was the shepherd, the spiritual leader, the one who guided the sheep along the right path. Certainly my name would be written in even more golden letters, but what I was about to discover about my own spiritual condition would leave me completely unfounded. The divine voice resounded again, this time with a harsher and more revealing tone that shook me to the core. Fidencio, now you will see the truth about those who call themselves my servants. The pages of the book began to turn on their own, pausing at specific sections where I could see details about the real lives of the members of my congregation. What began to be revealed left me completely shaken and speechless. Crescencio, your trusted treasurer, the voice said as images formed on the golden pages. He diverts 30% of all tithes and offerings to feed his online gambling habit. He owes $87,000 to local moneylenders and uses the sacred money to try to settle his debts. I could see Crescencio on the computer placing bets of $1,000 a week on casino and sports sites. Euphemia, who teaches children about Jesus on Sundays, continued the divine revelation. On Saturdays, she transforms into Godmother Euphemia, maintaining a Santeria altar in her garage. She receives desperate clients, she does binding work, and delivers to the cemetery. The images showed her in white dresses, surrounded by red candles and offerings to entities of darkness. It was impossible to believe what I was seeing. Placido, your deacon for 15 years, the voice continued relentlessly. He sells drugs to the church's own youth in the parking lot after services. Cocaine, marijuana, and ecstasy turned the sacred courtyard into a distribution point. I saw Placido handing out small packages to young men I knew from the youth ministry, receiving money in return. My heart was being torn apart piece by piece. Venancio, the leader of the men's group, continued the revelation. He maintains 3 different lovers, one in each neighborhood of the city. He uses the tithe money he should have given to pay for motels and gifts for his concubines. The images showed him leaving cheap hotels with women who weren't his wife. His wife doesn't know anything. She believes he works as a self-employed insurance salesman. Delfina, the choir leader, the divine voice gave no respite. He performs clandestine abortions in the basement of his home twice a week. He charges $500 per procedure using instruments that he sterilizes in the same kitchen where he prepares food for the family. Seeing that woman who sang hymns about life carrying babies away made me, it caused spiritual nausea. Bartholomew, your secretary, continued the terrifying revelation. He diverts medications from the health center where he works and resells them in poor neighborhoods for exorbitant prices. Insulin, blood pressure medications, antibiotics. He profits from the suffering of the poor. The images showed him hiding medications in plastic bags in the trunk of his car. Epiphania, treasurer of the women's ministry, the voice continued inexorably. He runs a child prostitution ring that operates during the early morning hours in downtown El Paso. He uses girls ages 12 to 15, some of them daughters of members of the church itself. This revelation made me scream in horror. I wondered how I hadn't perceived such evil among people I considered holy. Fortunato, leader of the deacons, another bomb exploded in my mind. He blackmails businessmen in the city with intimate photos he obtains through hidden cameras in the bathrooms of his cleaning company. He extorts $50,000 a month from these men. I saw him installing micro cameras in locker rooms and blackmailing influential people in the area. Jacinta, the coordinator of the Bible school, the voice kept revealing horrors. He kidnaps children from the streets and sells them to wealthy families from other states who want a legal adoption. He charges $100,000 per child. He has already sold 17 children in the last 2 years. The images showed her talking to homeless people, offering food in exchange for information about abandoned children. Every one of them sings my hymns on Sundays, the voice said with infinite sadness. They raise their hands during the worship services. They say hallelujah with fervor. They contribute with generous offerings, but their hearts are completely given over to darkness. They use my house as a facade to hide their abominations. I was trembling with horror, realizing that my church was a den of criminals disguised as saints. The divine voice paused for what seemed like an eternity before continuing with the most devastating revelation of all. Now, Fidencio, you will see the truth about your own family, about those you trust and love most in this world. Prepare your heart, Fidencio, the divine voice said with a compassion that made me tremble even more. What you are about to see about your own family will be the most difficult trial of your life. The golden pages turned again, and this time the images that began to form were of people who I loved more than my own life. My stomach tightened violently when I realized that not even my family was immune to this devastating revelation. Zelda, your wife of 25 years, began the revelation that would shatter my world. She has been in an adulterous relationship with Todora, your assistant pastor, for exactly 2 years and 4 months. The images formed clearly before my eyes. My wife and my right-hand man in the ministry kissing passionately in the church office after services. I saw them together at the motel on Highway 85 every Tuesday afternoon, when I thought she was visiting her sick mother. They meet 3 times a week. The relentless voice continued, Tuesdays at the motel, Thursdays at Todora's house when Kamla travels to visit family, and Saturday mornings at the apartment they rented together in the central El Paso neighborhood. I saw my wife lying blatantly, fabricating commitments to the women's ministry, to meet my shepherd auxiliary. 25 years of marriage, it had been nothing but a sham for the past 2 years. Fabricio, your beloved son, the revelation continued to destroy every piece of my heart. He uses the youth ministry as a front for a drug money laundering operation. The events they organize, the retreats, the conferences, everything serves to launder dirty money. I saw my own son receiving suitcases of money from known drug traffickers in the border region, transforming our church into a front company for organized crime. He charges a 20% commission on each operation. The voice continued to tear at my soul. In the last year, he laundered $2,400,000 through church events. The money comes in as donations from anonymous businessmen and comes out clean through expenses such as sound equipment, decorations, and catering for the events. My son, the boy I raised in the ways of the Lord, had become a professional criminal. Todora isn't just your wife's lover, more than that. Bombs were exploding in my mind. He is Fabricio's mentor in this criminal operation. He was the one who introduced your son to the region's drug traffickers last year. Todra has connections to organized crime since before he entered the ministry. I saw my assistant pastor in secret meetings with known criminals, planning how to use our church to launder drug money. Your wife knows everything about her son's criminal activities. The revelation continued to destroy me inside. She is the one who falsifies the event invoices, creates the false expense reports, manipulates the church's accounting. Zelda is not an innocent victim. She is a seasoned criminal who chose to betray you in every way possible. Watching my wife sign fraudulent documents made me feel like I was dying inside. The apartment they rented in central El Paso, the divine voice continued, it serves as a temporary depot for drugs before distribution. Todra and Fabricio use that place to store cocaine and crack cocaine coming from Mexico. Your wife helps package the drugs into small packages for retail sale. My entire family is conspiring against me and against God at the same time. Fabricio plans to take over the church when you die or retire. More terrifying details were revealed. He has already spoken with the drug traffickers about expanding the operation, transforming our entire congregation into a megachurch that would be the largest money laundering operation in all of Texas. My own son dreamed of transforming God's house into an organized crime empire. They plan to get rid of you very soon, the voice said with infinite sadness. Todra and Zelda have already discussed putting poison in your food gradually, simulating a natural heart problem. They want you to die as a respected pastor so they can inherit the church and expand illegal businesses without interference. My own wife plotting to kill me. During these 2 years, while you fasted and prayed seeking God's will for your life, the revelation reached its climax. Your family was building an empire of lies and betrayal, criminality using the sacred name you honor so much. I felt as if my soul was being ripped from my body piece by piece. Everything I believed about my life was a complete illusion. And now, Fidencio, the voice said, preparing for the final blow, the time has come to see how many members of your congregation are truly saved and to discover exactly what your own spiritual condition is before my throne. The golden pages turned again, this time pausing on a specific section that made me understand the full extent of the spiritual tragedy of my congregation of 2,800 people who attend your church. Fidencio, the divine voice said with profound sadness, only 43 names are written in the book of life. The number was so small that I had difficulty processing it. Less than 2% of my members were truly saved. Look who the true chosen ones are. The voice continued as the names began to appear in shining gold letters. Primitivo Sanchez, the 62-year-old gardener who works in church maintenance. He donates half of his minimum wage to needy families in the congregation, but never tells anyone. He was fasted every Friday for 15 years, praying for the church members, via Primitivo silently cleaning the church, praying for every pew he fixed. Dona Refugio Aguilar, the 70-year-old cleaning lady who arrives 2 hours before every service to prepare the atmosphere. The list went on. She prays for every person who will sit in those pews, asking God to touch each one's heart. She never spoke ill of anyone in 70 years of life, even when she was betrayed by her husband and abandoned with 5 small children. Dona Refugio was practically invisible to most the members, but she was precious in God's eyes. Esperanza Quiroga, the 23-year-old woman with Down syndrome, whom everyone half ignores, the revelation continued. She prays for her enemies every night before going to sleep, including those who mock her because of her disability. She instantly forgives any offense and loves people with a pure heart that few achieve. I saw Esperanza praying alone in her room, asking for blessings for people who mistreated her. Crisanta Villanueva, the 45-year-old homeless man who sleeps in the church parking lot. The voice continued revealing the true saints. He never misses services, even though he has been starving for 3 days. He shares his only meal of the day with other homeless people and always offers to help clean up after events. Crisanta was sometimes kicked out by the guards, but he always returned to the next service without paying. Resentment. Oriana Montmayor, the 38-year-old former prostitute who converted 2 years ago. Another name appeared in the Holy Book. She is avoided by many members who know her past. but she dedicates her life to rescuing other women from prostitution. She has already managed to get 12 girls off the streets, using her own domestic salary to rent rooms for them. Oriana always sat in the back of the church, but her heart was closer to God than many in the front row. Dionisio Cabrera, the 50-year-old physically disabled man who comes in a wheelchair. The list continued, showing the chosen outcasts. He intercedes for all the sick in the church during their sleepless nights caused by chronic pain. He never asked for prayer for himself, he always prays for others. He supports his 80-year-old mother with his disability pension. Dionisio had more faith than many preachers. Famous people: Clotilde Medina, the 65-year-old widow who lost her only son in an accident. Another name shone in the book. Mina Nana comforts other mothers who lost children. She visits hospitals every week, bringing words of comfort to grieving families. She never questioned God for her tragedy, she simply became an instrument of consolation for others. Clotilde transformed her pain into a ministry of love. Nemesio Fuentes, the 52-year-old recyclable material collector, was saved. He uses part of his earnings collecting garbage to buy medicine for the church's elderly in need. He works 16 hours a day through rain and sun, but never complains about the life God gave him. Nemesio was more spiritually prosperous than many of the congregation's business owners. Visitación Herrera, the 40-year-old housekeeper who raises 4 children alone. The revelation continued. She teaches her children to pray for the bosses who humiliated her and always found reasons to thank God, even in the greatest difficulties. Her children never saw her speak ill of anyone. Visitación was an example of practical holiness that few could imitate. These 34 people like them are the only ones truly saved in your congregation, the voice said, with a mixture of joy and sadness. While the rich and powerful in your church live in sin, the poor and despised are the ones who truly know my heart. It was exactly as Jesus had taught. The last would be first in the kingdom of heaven. All of them are ignored, marginalized, or despised by the most influential members of the church. The divine voice concluded, but their names shine brighter in my book than the stars in the firmament. They are my true treasures in this congregation that you thought you knew. With my hands shaking with pure terror, I decided to search my own name in the sacred pages of the Book of Life. After all, I was the shepherd, the spiritual leader, the one who had guided the sheep along the path of salvation for over 20 years. Certainly my name would be written in even more golden letters, in a position of honor, among the saved. I flipped through the pages, anxiously searching for the section where the names of the religious leaders would be listed. When I finally found my name, I felt as if the ground had disappeared from beneath my feet. Fidencio Salazar was there, yes, written in the same divine, golden handwriting, but the ink was slowly disappearing before my eyes. Letter by letter, my name was gradually being erased, as if an invisible eraser were passing over it. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever witnessed in my entire life. Your name is being removed from the Book of Life, Fidencio, the divine voice said with a sadness that pierced my soul. You started well, but you strayed from the true path. You no longer preach the pure gospel, you preach material prosperity. You no longer seek the salvation of souls, you seek the financial growth of your church. Each word was like a razor cutting my heart to pieces. You sell blessings in exchange for generous offerings. The voice continued, relentless voice. You promise healing to those who give the most money. You guarantee prosperity to faithful tithers. You use my name to enrich yourself. You transformed my house into a business. Just like the money changers I expelled from the temple, I saw images of myself preaching that God would financially bless those who contributed the most, promising material returns for spiritual investments. Your downfall began in March 2016. The voice specified with surgical precision when you bought that white BMW X5 with your tithe money. At that moment, you stopped being a servant and became a merchant of faith. I remembered that day perfectly. I had justified the purchase by saying that a prosperous pastor would be a better witness to the congregation. From then on, every decision of yours was based on profit, not love. The devastating revelation continued.